Did you hear the one about the famous violinist who played in a subway station and no one noticed? Well, it was a different story today, and Jeffrey Brown was there.
It was a sight that almost no one watched as it happened, but gained much attention afterwards. A superstar of the classical musical world, Joshua Bell, playing in a metro station in Washington, D.C. in 2007, largely ignored by a few thousand commuters on their way to work. An article by Gene Weingarten of the Washington Post about the event or non-event won a Pulitzer Prize.
It was about the way we overschedule our lives, where people had to be in a certain place at a certain time, bing bang, going to work, and they couldn't take 3 minutes.
Your point was Americans are too busy.
Yeah, Americans are too busy.
So Joshua Bell playing a $3.5 million Stradivarius violin. People had just paid $100 the night before to see him, and he was largely ignored. Why? Because people aren't expecting to see beauty sometimes in their everyday life. We're so focused on what we're doing that we have come to be a busy people. I talked to several people coming in this morning. How you doing? Busy, because it's the holidays and so on. But here's my concern. As spiritual believers, we're not just missing beauty, but we're missing God. And not God so much maybe in that devotional time in the morning, because I think this is something we've drilled in so hard since the beginning of Vineyard Life Church. Most of you have a time that you set aside, the first fruits of your day you give to God. But what I'm concerned about is throughout our day and the pace of our lives. Yes, we are busy people and we live busy lives. But the problem is, I believe the pace of our lives is what's hurting us. And it's hurting our relationships with God, in our marriages, with our coworkers and friends, and with our kids. One of the problems is that we have connected busyness with being important and valuable, like Mandy mentioned earlier. We wear busyness as a badge of honor. Have you noticed that? You know, how you doing? Oh, busy. And you are legitimately. It's not like you're making it up. But like I said, we've made it such a good thing in our world. It's a virtue, isn't it, to be busy? Yes, they're a very busy person. But it really isn't. It's not virtuous. And we shouldn't wear it as a badge of honor. Can you imagine if we took other things that were not to be valued and tried to create value in them? Like you come to me, Tony, how you doing? How was your week? Oh, it was pretty good. I was pretty racist this week. Yeah, I just judged some people on TV and in traffic and stereotyped a bunch of folks. Yeah, I was pretty racist. How was your week? You'd be shocked at that. You know, but it's the same way. We've got to see busyness as the same thing, as a sin, as something that keeps us from God, especially when it's something we can control. Now, like Mandy said, I understand that many of your lives are hectic and it's chaotic, but I believe that there's a lot of opportunities to redeem some moments and to include God into what we're doing and ask His grace to maybe deconstruct some things in our lives and build something better. And that's what January is going to be about. And I know what it's like. I mean, you wake up in the morning and immediately your mind is racing. Everything you've got to do. Busy, busy, busy. You start the pace throughout the day. It's go, 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 go. You come home, you're tired, you eat something, you get chores done, and then it's time for bed, and you lay in bed thinking about the day and tomorrow, and you can't sleep because you're so wired. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Anybody live there? That's why so many Americans have to take something to help them to sleep, because they can't get their mind to slow down. They can't rest. And it's not just our busy schedules. But again, I feel like I touch on this every week, but it's such a profound thing that's overlapping our world right now. This whole thing with COVID and masking and vaccinations and tension in our government and social issues and so on. We are living in this time of pressure and anxiety. And you add to that busyness on top and a lack of ways to connect with God. And it has everybody right on the edge. And that's why you see people just kind of explode over the simplest things, because their tolerance for one more thing is just gone. Parents with their kids, and I watch with friends and people at workplaces and customers, and people are just being rude and insensitive and impatient. And like I said, it has a lot to do with our pace of life. There was an article written recently by Tim Creeder in the New York Times, and he said, "I'm so busy is a boast disguised as a complaint." Isn't that good? He said it's actually a self-given compliment, kind of a humble brag. Oh yeah, I'm so busy. Yes, we're all busy. You're busy. We're busy. We're all so important and valuable and busy. And I really want to hit this thing because I want us to change our language in this. And I want us to be different. He goes on to say in his article, we are addicted to busyness and we fear what we might have to face in its absence. Because what is the alternative to busyness? No, it's not rest. It's boredom. I'm so bored. Our brains operate so fast that when we do go, okay, today I'm going to rest. Woohoo! And I sit down and I look around and go, oh, I need to do that. Well, what should I do? Because I got to be productive in my rest. Should I read my Bible? Should I pray? Should I call somebody? Should I write something? Should I journal? Should I listen to a podcast? Should I put on some worship music? What should I do? Because I've got to make this time productive, and I've only got so much time. And we don't know how to rest. Rest, unfortunately, in our culture, has become synonymous with laziness. Rest equals laziness. And so I believe that we need to redefine what life looks like. Now, that's a big statement. To redefine how we see life, especially in a society that is not going to see it the way we're going to talk about this month. And we're going to break this down over a whole month, so be here every week for it. Today's just kind of the introduction, just kind of diagnosing the problem. Jesus said in John chapter 10, verse 10, he said, the thief, Satan, comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But I came that they might have life and have it abundantly. We know that's what Jesus wants to do for us. But most of us, when we think about what would abundant life look like, we're not there. And we don't know how to get there. And while we're building toward that life, we feel like that Satan is stealing away what we could have with God. See, I think we all understand Satan is a thief and he wants to steal our health and our resources and wreck our relationships. But I think a more subtle attack is on our attention. He just wants to distract us and get our attention off of God. We cannot have the abundant life that Jesus talked about if we're in a constant state of hurry and distracted from what's important and what's life-giving. In fact, let me say this. The greatest enemy to the life you want is probably the life you're living. Let me say it again. The greatest enemy to the life you want is probably the life you're living. And what we tend to do is protect the busyness and protect our way of life that's actually hurting us. So I want us to be able to take a real hard, honest look at our lives for the sake of actually becoming better and moving into this abundant life that Jesus talked about. And that's what we're going to do this month. So how did we get here? I mentioned last week about a great social experiment that began in 2004. It's actually 2007. And when I talk about a revolution in the world, what I'm talking about is a change that affects the entire world. In the 1400s, Gutenberg invented the printing press. That changed the world because now instead of handwriting books and journals, people could actually print them and distribute it widely. So the whole world, or the known world, modern world at that time, could be informed and could be educated and share ideas back and forth. And it led to an explosion of knowledge, the age of enlightenment and science and everything. It changed the world, a printing press. In 2007, this changed the world. Information in the palm of our hands. It's when the iPhone was released, the smartphone. It now was available to have the internet and the whole world available to us. Not just the iPhone that year, but that was also the year that Facebook and Twitter went global. The Kindle came out. Android was released. Google bought YouTube and turned it into this worldwide phenomena. And IBM created the first artificial intelligence, Watson. And this laid the foundation of a digital world in which we are connected, and so thoroughly connected that if there were any gaps in our lives, any moments that we could rest or think or be creative or something else, we have now filled them in. We've stuffed in all those places with information. People ask, and then they discovered that not only could the information be out there, but you could monetize it. You could make money off this. And the minute they figured out that they could make money off you by putting just the right things in front of you, all kinds of algorithms were written about how to grab your attention and hold your attention. People used to ask me, Pastor, can the devil read my mind? I go, no, but Google can. It knows just what you like. It does. I mean, okay, how many, just, you can respond to this. You've been talking about buying something, all of a sudden it shows up in your Facebook feed. Absolutely. How does that happen? Alexa, she knows. So the average person, this is an adult, not a teen. The average adult spends 2.5 hours a day on their phone, over 70 sessions. Teens, this is crazy. I almost didn't share this fact because it just didn't seem real. But a recent study of teens, they touch their phone 2,600 times a day. Checking it. Why? Because that's validation. It's that ego-driven, that what's going on in my world. I've got to stay connected. God forbid I don't know the latest thing on Netflix. You haven't seen this? Have you lived under a rock? And you feel that way today. You don't know what's going on in the world. This happened 12 minutes ago. How can you not know? And this is how we've lived. And I'm not sure, between social media, constant news feeds, online gaming, and entertainment, the impact is impossible to measure. Now, I love technology, and I had my first PC back in '84. I had a phone when you carried them in a bag, and it weighed 30 pounds, and it was actual receiver. So I've been around tech my whole life. And some of it I love. Let's face it, our marriage is better today because of Google Maps. Come on. You're going down the road, Lori's great. He's not exactly great directions. So I said, well, just look at the map. How long is the next turn? That far. Okay, I had no perspective. It's not going to help me. Where do we turn? Right there. Now, just, Google tells you. And so we love the technology. And it is handy. It really is. I'm not putting it down. The problem is we've captured so much of it. Like I said, we're in this giant social experiment. And we don't know what it's doing to us. And what's really scary is we don't know the impact on our kids that are being raised in a digital age. Our attachment to all this information and all these apps has the same characteristics as addiction. And you get over, so I'm not going to watch Facebook, I'm not going to get on Facebook for a while. oh wow, TikTok, this is cool. I spent one day this week, I spent an hour. How long are TikTok videos? Like 1 minute? So I watched at least 60. Because an hour went by like that. How could that happen? Dogs can't be that funny. But apparently they knew what to feed me. Oh, help me, Lord. Maybe your escape isn't your phone or smart device. Maybe it's TV or books or shopping or something else. But there's a spiritual element to all of these that I want to touch on today. Corrie ten Boom, she was a Holocaust survivor. She said, if the devil can't make you sin, he'll make you busy. That's that distraction I was talking about. Even Carl Jung, the psychologist, said, hurry is not of the devil. Hurry is the devil. Dallas Willard, the great Christian leader who just died recently, he was the head of Department of Philosophy at USC. And he said that hurry is the number one challenge to discipleship or becoming like Jesus. Just being in a hurry. So I want to go through 10 symptoms of what a psychologist called hurry sickness. He coined that phrase in the 1950s. So it's been around a little while, but it's just growing. So here are 10 symptoms, and just kind of grade yourself if you ever experience these. Number one, I'm calling racing. Now, racing is when you are in traffic and you strategically look for the shortest lane when you come up to a stop sign. Or in the grocery store, you try to calculate which is the shortest line and which is going to move the fastest. Anybody do a little racing? Sure. Multitasking. You try to do a lot of things and then you forget one of them because you're trying to do so much at once. You forget something. Hypersensitivity. You get annoyed easily. Minor things become triggers that make you angry or offended. It's another sign of hurry sickness. Restlessness. You can't relax or sleep. You don't like quiet time because you don't know what to do with yourself, like I mentioned. Next one, work or nonstop productivity. Nonstop activity. We just have to keep going, have to keep pushing. There's always something else to accomplish. We put our joy off in the future. Once I get this done, we lie to ourselves and say, once I get to this place, we're going to be able to rest. We're going to be able to find. We're going to be financially clear. We're going to be able to take a vacation, whatever it might be. But that day doesn't seem to come. We're driven by accomplishment. We are driven by accumulation. And happiness is tied to one or the other. Just always being driven. Emotionally numb. We're just exhausted emotionally. No empathy because we have nothing to give to anybody else. Because we're just overwhelmed. Next, escapist behaviors. Now this is just indulging in many of the cultural narcotics that are out there. Whatever it might be. Lack of spiritual disciplines. Silence and solitude and meditating, listening to God, worshiping, fasting, praying. These are all spiritual disciplines. Unfortunately, these are the first to go rather than the first to go to for many people. And finally, isolation. You get disconnected from God and family and friends, and this is also a sign that you're moving toward depression. Because, like I say, you can't take anybody else's problems. You don't want to deal with anybody else because you've got your own stuff. And as a result, you feel overwhelmed. Now, I'm not going to ask you how you scored, but I imagine we all hit on several of those. The sad thing is this has become the way of the world, and this has become accepted as the way we live. Now, how do we deal with these? Let me give you an example of racing, for example, because this is one I always deal with. Here's how I'm working on that right now. When I'm in traffic or in a store, I realize, as I mentioned last week in the message, that I am the dwelling place of God. I am the temple of God. God dwells inside of me. When I was born again, the Holy Spirit came to live inside of me, to represent the Godhead in me. And that means God is always with me. See, our problem is not the lack of God's presence, it's the lack of awareness of God's presence. And because I'm going all the time, I go, wait a minute, God's with me. And I'm in this line. That must be where He wants me. He didn't tell me to move, that's me. So I'm just going to stay in this line. It's slower. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to take out my phone. No. I mean, maybe I'm going to talk to somebody. Introverts hate this. Extroverts, yeah, how you doing? Good to see you. Talking in line. Introverts are like, oh, that's why they have their phone. This is why God made the smartphone. So I don't have to talk to people. So I can walk down the street and be like this and nobody will know me or acknowledge me. But see, if we are to be the portable temple of God, the presence of God, and we want to bring life to people, then we have to be sensitive to God. We have to listen to Him. We've got to be in contact with Him. Lori's a lot better at this than I am. Hurry affects our relationships. And my concern, again, as your pastor, is not that you will abandon or renounce your faith, but you'll just get distracted from it. That you'll hurry through life and miss moments that God really wants to communicate with you and really wants to show you some things about your life. What if God wants to give you a creative idea that could transform your life, your business, your income? What if God wanted to give you a word that would change someone's life? What if God wanted to show you something in your life that was really hurting you and you're not even aware of it? But if we don't slow down enough to listen, we'll never experience all those good things that I believe God wants to do. I wonder if Jesus would say to us what He said to Martha. Remember, Jesus was going to Martha and Mary's house, and Martha's real busy setting up for the meal and all that, and Mary's just hanging out with Jesus. And Martha is ticked off because Mary isn't helping her. So what does she do? She goes and complains to Jesus, and Jesus' response is so good. He says, Martha, Martha. He has to say her name twice just to get her attention. Martha, Martha, slow down. He says, you're anxious and troubled about so many things, but one thing is necessary. Just one. There's only one thing, Martha, that's important. Jesus would say to you, there's one thing that's important today. First and foremost, Mary has chosen that good portion. It will not be taken away from her. What is it? It's the presence of Jesus. Now, Martha was so out of her mind at this point that she's so frustrated. And she's supposed to be doing this for God. But instead of doing it for God, she's so stressed that now she's mad because nobody's acknowledging her or helping her. She's the most important thing going in her own mind, and this is how we get. And we start blaming everybody else. It's never our fault. We never look inward. We're looking at other people. And then what will happen is we start blaming God. And that's what she does. She's telling Jesus, Mary is not doing my will, so you get on her. You do my will. That's when things are really kind of twisted in your head. And you start trying to order God around. And I was thinking about this morning. What if Martha would have sat down? Okay, Jesus, I'm going to sit here next to Mary. Alexa, set the oven timer for 30 minutes. You think she would have been engaged with Jesus? Probably not. Because she hadn't dealt with this thing in her. She wasn't making right choices because her values, her motives weren't correct. And this is what we're going for in this series. To touch on some of these values that we've adapted from society that are just not healthy for us. And they are certainly not healthy for our kids. And as we move further in the series, we're going to focus on the role that parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles and teachers play in the lives of these kids and how we can help them to not go down this path. Study after study, and here this is actually having a physical impact on our brains. We're actually becoming dumber the more we're on smartphones. It really is, because we're not doing critical thinking. We're not doing creative thinking. You know, years ago, the news media for network news discovered that, I think it was around 2000, that the average attention span of a human adult person was 12 seconds. So they started changing graphics and camera angles and cutting away to live news feeds and so on to keep people's attention. Recently, a study, I think it was 2 years ago, was done, that our attention span has gone from 12 seconds to 8 seconds. 8 seconds, that's all we can focus. Now, let me help you put this in perspective. A human being has an attention span of 8 seconds. Put this up. A goldfish can be attentive to something longer than a human being. That's where we've allowed our brain to devolve to. And again, we're not getting smarter. This is not healthy for us. So how do we free ourselves from this distraction? There was a time when life was slower, and I think there was a pace that people followed. And it was easier. And it was better for relationships and connection with God and just healthier mental well-being. There was a missionary I was reading about American missionary who went to Africa. He hired porters to get him inland to his mission stage where he was going to be working. And the porters started out the first day. They had a good day, covered a lot of ground. They stopped that night, camped for the night. Next morning they get up and they're ready to go on farther. And he goes, "Let's go." And they're all just sitting there. And he asked the leader, he goes, "We got to move. How come nobody's moving?" He said, "They're waiting for their souls to catch up with their body." Where'd you leave your soul last? Is it caught up with your body? Have you become just this bundle of energy and activity that you don't even know why, but you just do it every day because that's what you do? Do you just go through the motions without your soul or God's presence with you being engaged in that? Here's how to get your life back. In Matthew 11, Jesus is going to say the same thing he said to Martha, but in other words. "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Now, he doesn't mean that he's going to take all this away from you. Some of it's just our choices, and some of us have got ourselves in financial states where we have to work the extra hours and all of that. I get it. And I think God will help us from that if we're sincere and if we want Him. We are not looking for just more comfort, just more mental health. We are looking to experience the presence of God, and that can happen in the busy season that you're in right now. He says, "All you who are labor and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle." I love that. Jesus isn't condemning us. He's gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. I mean, I think a good nap would help a lot of us. This is one of those good days for it, isn't it? The only thing better is if golf was on TV. There's no way better to fall asleep on a Sunday afternoon than it'd be cloudy outside and you're watching golf. They even whisper for you. It's so wonderful. He says, "For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." So what Jesus says is, look, like two yoke of oxen connected, get yoked up with me. I'm already dwelling in you. I have all the wisdom and grace that you need. I want to lead you out of this situation. But to be able to do that, we've got to be connected. We've got to be close. I think some of this just starts with not getting more time. Oh, if I just had more time. If there were just more hours in the day, what would I do? The same thing I did with the other 24. I'd fill it. I'd just be busy. It's not about adding things to your life. Everything that we're going to talk about over the next few weeks is not adding stuff to your life. It's not more weight on you. It's actually going to be maybe subtracting some things in your life. Just like I talked about that issue of racing. Just changing that, connecting with God when you're in traffic or in a store or anytime you're waiting for something on hold. When I'm on hold, my temperature just goes up. Why? Because my time, I value my time. Well, God doesn't seem to value my time as much, or He wouldn't have me on hold, right? He could have made the situation where I didn't even have to be on the phone and didn't have to deal with that. You know, sometimes when I'm on hold, that's the time that God can really talk to me. You know, more people hear from God in the shower than any place else. Why? Because you have your phone in there. You don't have anything to distract you. Your brain's on autopilot. You know what to do. And so it's one of those moments when God can get through and speak to you. And I love that God does it, because it could be very easy for Him to say, look, you're not giving me time, forget you. That's what I would be. I'm God and you, this tiny little thing on this tiny little planet way off in space. And yet, as a father, He just wants to be with me. And my life is better when He is. So today, I just want you to ask a question. Where is it that you may allow God to insert Himself into your life? Where in particular could you maybe involve Him and listen a little better? Maybe it's on the drive to work. Maybe you don't need K-Love on. Maybe you just need to turn off the radio and just talk to God and just enjoy His presence. A lot of times when I'm in God's presence, He doesn't say a thing. But a lot of times when Lori and I are together, we don't say a thing. But it's just being together and knowing that we love each other. And see, that's what God wants. So here's a prayer I want us to pray. God, help me to slow down enough to experience Jesus more fully and to love people deeply. Now, think about what would have to happen in your life for that to happen. And then we're going to pray that God begins to orchestrate things in our lives. That He does what only He can do, and then He'll prompt us to do what we need to be in a place where we can love Him more and love people more. So let's pray this.